Hello, Derek.
Yep.
How's it going?
Good, man. You
Yeah,
good?
yeah, I'm all good. I'm all good. Did you catch the Apple event yesterday?
Yeah, I'm Team Orange. I
Team Orange.
I'm digging the
Oh.
orange. The air is sweet, and I like the chrome of it.
Yeah,
But like that plateau that they call it on the back still just gets me. Like I think if they released like an Air with no camera, super
yeah,
thin phone,
yep,
I would carry a separate camera with me.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's
yeah.
beautiful, but
I,
that bulge on all the phones just gets me.
it drives me crazy. I feel like they could just easily get away with like making the phone the exact same thickness as the camera,
I would love that.
because then you wouldn't have that awkward thing when you sit your iPhone on like a hard surface and it like rattles and moves when you're
It's
just like
yeah.
it drives
You
me
can't like
crazy.
tap and type on it because it
Yeah,
moves. I
yeah,
know. I totally agree. I've always said that I wish that the phone would just be like the same thickness all the way down.
yeah, yeah. I mean,
Um,
there's no reason why they can't do that. I just feel like they just don't want to. I
yeah.
don't know. They just don't want to do that.
Like I said, the thin phone of the Air is cool, and I would
Yeah,
have one. Like I said, if there was no camera and it was just the whole thing was that thin. But it's just because I want it uniform. I just want it flat.
same,
I noticed that
same.
with the plateau being full width on the next one, and the camera is still on the left, and that's what causes the tilt. Like, why don't they put
Right.
another
Another. Yeah,
something
yeah,
on that side, like around that sensor that's over there,
yeah,
that would at least balance it so that it just sits
yeah,
at a nice angle.
yeah. I
Mhm.
actually, I actually was sitting getting lunch today. I was sitting downstairs, and my girlfriend Katie was. She's got the same phone as me, the 16 Pro, and she actually. I watched her, like, she actually puts her iPhone on like two coasters just so that it prevents like the moving of
No
the phone.
kidding.
And I
Wow.
was
Good
like,
for
she's
her.
actually she's actually done that just to prevent like the racket it makes, you know.
Yeah. It's
But yeah, it's a design
unfortunate.
flaw
It'll
from
eventually get
Apple.
solved in some way as the cameras get thinner and thinner and
Of
smaller.
course,
But
yeah,
yeah, it's amazing that we've evolved now to be saying that I'm down to not have a camera at all, to be able to have a
yeah.
flat phone.
I mean, I love how the Air looks with just the one camera now.
Mhm.
Rather than like the three, you know, cameras. I don't know. I really love how that looks, and I can't wait to actually see it in person, like how the kind of shiny silver
Mhm.
chrome looks.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I thought about doing the switch, just having kids and taking a lot of
yeah,
pictures. I always appreciate the pro cameras.
yeah,
Um, but again, it's the bulge. But it is what it is. I'll get the pro. I'd like to try out the orange.
yeah,
It is what it is.
yeah.
Like you
So
said, it'll
what have we
solve in the
got?
future.
So what have we got on the agenda today then?
Design careers, talking about progressing through design careers. I see so many, I guess, opinions on how people think they should grow and such. And I don't have all the perfect answers, but I certainly have a lot of feelings about it,
Yeah,
as being somebody who has gone through junior IC roles up to leadership roles. But so yeah, certainly my opinions and just based on experience. But yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on that in general.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would love
Yeah.
to get into them. I think I was just talking off air there, and I mentioned that obviously me and you have had obviously very different sort of like careers in terms of like the kind of companies that we've been at, the teams that we've been on, and I think that might be beneficial for people to kind of learn a bit more about the two of our kind of situations in that sense.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, I
totally
mean,
agree.
I'd love to know where you'd want to start.
Yeah, I mean, background on me for folks that might not know me or know my history. So I've been in the industry for about 20 years, starting off on design. I learned to code probably about 5 years into that when I started working with some engineers who couldn't quite translate designs to the web, to implementation at the quality that I wanted them to be. So that's kind of when I decided that I'm gonna learn how to code so that I can build my own ideas, and then put a heavy focus on that kind of throughout my career. So early on, again, it was just design mainly. I think it was my second job that is when it was a web agency, and that's when I started kind of writing more and more code and learning how to translate designs into HTML and CSS. Lots of IC roles. That's always kind of been my focus. I preferred to contribute more than manage. The people management part of it and the team management hasn't ever been something that I've been super passionate about, like some others. And as you know, working with me, like I'm very much player coach. I spend as much time
Yeah.
kind of working boots on the ground as much as leading. And I didn't get up into more like manager roles until I was kind of asked to do it, and I bucked it a lot to where really didn't want to do it, and I made it very clear that I really wanted to stay an individual contributor in IC. And just because I love to design and I love to write, and it's my hobby.
Yeah.
Folks, I tell you,
Yeah.
it's just my hobby. People just happen to pay me for it. Like,
Yeah.
it's a really great position to be in, but to navigate everything that comes along with managing and leadership and such certainly makes it more complicated if you want to be able to continue to contribute, right on the front lines. Um, it makes mentoring much easier when you have the empathy of, I understand what you're having to do to solve this and the work that's going into it. The same way with engineering, though, as well, to be able to have that communication either to engineers of like, I understand what it takes to implement this. Let me know how I can help you. Let me know how I can contribute. But then also bridging that communication gap between designers who are non-technical and then engineers who don't necessarily have that type of taste refinement. And it's proven very effective kind of being a manager and being a leader and building teams and running teams, of being able to kind of embed that empathy as the foundations of the teams, and that trust and understanding is extremely critical, for success and culture.
Hmm.
And I think you've experienced this on one of my teams. Of it's just really really important to hire the right people to embed themselves in that culture, but also just expect that requirement of understanding, empathy, and working to just create the best thing you possibly can, either by yourself or together.
Yeah.
What's your experience there?
How do you feel like, because I've seen, like, obviously I was kind of early on at Clerk when the two of us kind of joined up at there, and as much as obviously I was coming on as like a new designer and things like that, and kind of for the first time in my career really joining like a much larger team. So for people listening that maybe don't know, what, like, kind of what my kind of career path has been like. I was a freelancer for the longest time. Obviously um, kind of been on teams, but not obviously at a full time capacity. I was always working with different clients and on different projects, but the first role that I encountered was on a very small team at Tailwind, which I think the lowest point there was maybe like five of us, I think. So I think, like, going from that to joining at Clerk, where there was, like, I think I ended up like 80 people or something, and obviously you're
Eventually,
not.
I think there was like 40 when we joined, 45,
Yeah,
something like that.
yeah. So, like, obviously, like you said, the first when we joined, the team probably doubled by the time that we left. So yeah, I think, like, what I was going to ask you there, like, um, how did you feel when you started, like, going into sort of kind of like head of design roles? Like, how did you feel, like, when you kind of really wanted to dive into, like, the actual work portion, as well as trying to hire for the team? Like, because I know for me, like, I, that's probably, like, I don't really see myself right now ever really wanting to be like a head of design, because I purely love the job of, like, designing and being in there and working on the actual product and, like, the web and stuff like that. So I'm curious to know, like, how you feel about that sort of hybrid sort of role, where you're obviously on the team as a designer as well, where you have to contribute to, like, the sort of kind of design work and, like, figuring out sort of the design system and all that sort of stuff. So I'm curious, like, how you've kind of managed to navigate that as you've kind of, like, been at more kind of senior roles.
Yeah. I Clerk was one of those roles where I was contracting for Clerk initially. to contribute to some of their upcoming stuff, and they had asked after a month or so to stick around and come on full time, and told them no a few times. I still wanted to kind of stay independent at the moment, and they were really serious about investing in design, and they were really serious in understanding that they had a cult following that they were developing, tons of community traction, growth, and the technology in place, but they wanted to be a design leader, and I really respected that. They wanted to stand out and show that they not only cared about the DX, they also care about how it looks, and investing in that. And I made it clear over and over, I didn't want to manage people. I consider coming on to design and to, contribute to that vision of the output. And then the offer came through as a head of design role. And I went back to him and said, this sounds a lot like a people management role. It's just something I didn't want to do. But then it ended up being a kind of a mindset shift for me of, well, who is going to run this team? Who is going to build this team? If I'm going to join, who's going to be that leader? And that uncertainty sort of pushed me into, if this is going to be a world-class team, I want to make sure that they have a world-class environment and a world-class culture. And if I don't take this type of role and at least attempt to contribute to that and attempt to drive that, then I'm going to have less control of the success of what they're looking for. And that's kind of what drove that decision. But also what drove that decision was conversations with you that I was having at that time before accepting that role, to kind of get those team foundations in place of like, who do I want to help support, drive, and inspire this culture? And you and I had just worked together at Tailwind for a little while. You had left Tailwind since we had worked together. It probably only had been like a month and a half when I reached out and was like, hey, I think I'm going to build this team. Would you be interested in doing that? And then I was also in conversation with Austin Calvage, a UI engineer that started at the same time that I did, and some other folks kind of, and it started to become clear that like this team was going to be really something special, and that I was willing to kind of lead that. So I didn't actually accept it until I formed more of a game plan of what was going to happen. And when that became clear, it became more comfortable to me. Another big factor as well, there's a friend of mine named Jared Ferris who used to be a VP of engineering at an agency back where I'm from in Ohio. And I've learned a ton from that guy. And he's an incredible manager. Folks love him, and kind of went to him with this decision of like, should I do this? Like, I really want to do design. And like, well, I'm going to build this design team and also just be one of the designers on the team, but also the head of design. And he kind of laughed at me of like, you buckle up. Like when you're a manager and you're building teams and running teams, like you are not going to have the time that you think you have. And one of the most critical things that he said to me is the more work that you get to yourself is based on how senior of folks that you hire. The more independent and autonomous people you hire, the less you're needed. So that from the foundation was more of a focus of hiring early on, more senior folks who knew what was needed, could just take a task and run and make sure it gets done, because the basis of my culture was based on trust. Hire the best possible people and just let them do their thing. And so early on, it was focused on hiring those types of people, because the time for mentorship and guidance and planning wasn't necessarily there, because we were so focused on reshaping and refinishing this company here. And I don't regret that. I think that was definitely the right decision. I'm proud of all the hires and how the team kind of progressed and got to where it was. But it was a decision of not wanting to be a manager, but realizing if I wasn't going to be a manager, somebody else was going to, and wasn't sure how healthy that was going to be. So essentially just took everything that I learned about things I didn't like about managers and making sure that didn't pollute the culture.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating because, I think that to be candid, I feel like that would be a horrible role for me. Like, I just couldn't see myself like taking on that responsibility of like managing a team and then also having to like, contribute to the sort of design work. And I think I've got like a good like when you were speaking there, a good like analogy came to my mind, and this is like a soccer related analogy that might make sense to you. I don't know, but like I feel like being a football manager or being a soccer manager, they it's very rare where you have to obviously create the tactics and the formations and have all the kind of knowledge, and that's what an individual manager is good at. But on the flip side of that, you also have to be a very good people person. You have to be a very good man manager, and if a player comes with an issue, you have to be really good at like helping that situation not escalate or whatever. And I know that's like quite dramatic, but I feel like it sort of like fits into the same sort of like role as like a head of design or someone who's in a kind of senior position at a company. And I feel like the two go hand in hand. I feel like if I was to become a head of design at one point, I feel like I would take that analogy with me and say, right, okay, I'm good at what I do here, and I can contribute to the best of my ability. And do what I do best on that side. But also at the same time, I have this responsibility of all these people that are on my team that I've kind of hired and helped hire. And so, yeah, I don't know. That's the sort of analogy I feel like I would take to if I ever went like into like a full-time head of design position. But yeah, I feel like that would resonate for sure.
Yeah. I think trust is key in all
Yeah.
that. Like, I feel strongly that like all of the team trust me, not only that I took care of them and made sure that they felt like they were doing the best work of their life, but also I was contributing as much in Figma. I was writing as much code. Like there was nothing that I would ever ask anybody to do that they know I wouldn't do also.
Yeah.
I was all about focusing on giving folks the things that they wanted to do, and the things that weren't as shiny, I would take away from them and take
Yeah.
ownership myself, because I
Yeah.
wanted folks to be really excited about what they were doing. Another part of
100%.
the success fair is leadership culture and the trust and alignment across all of the teams. Um, I didn't know Kyle McDonald had a product over there. I didn't know Nick Parsons had a marketing over there. Like I didn't know those people before I started at all. And now they are still to this day, after being gone for a year now, two of my best friends. And I talk with them weekly. And
Yeah.
our team alignments and the trust across teams just nurtured that culture across teams, and on execution trust. And it was you experienced that a lot within marketing teams
Yeah.
of, when Nick asked for something or needed something, needed a site, or needed a blog post image, like no one ever asked like, this is what I want it to look like, or said, this is what I want it to look like, or influenced that. They
Yeah.
trusted the way that I wanted them to be trusted of, James, we need this. And we know that James is going to do the best work that he possibly can. So whatever he returns is going to be what we use. And it was very efficient in that way.
Yeah.
So that trust is just so critical. When somebody's stuck on a design, not feeling very inspired, let's get into a Figma file together and start kind of like just churning on ideas. Same way with code. And again, just realizing that I had extra inspiration to provide to them. I had extra kind of like fuel for their fire that I could give them to kind of unblock them. It's something that Alvish always said to me over there is he always said, I always feel better, and I feel like unlocked and more creative every time I like pair with you on a design. And I thought it always made me feel really good to know that I was contributing to his career and his progression.
Yeah.
By inspiring him and making him feel like he was doing better work. I'll never forget an experience I had with Emil Kowalski when he joined the team. I have massive respect for him. I think he's one of the best, if not the best, front end design engineers and UI engineers out there. And one of the first few times we were pairing on some stuff he was writing in Tailwind, and we were talking about some ideas, and I just jotted down some code real quick to get what we were talking about working. And he's like, I can't believe you did that fast. Like that was wild. And I laughed because this is Emil Kowalski. And like to like teach him something and show him something was really like just made me feel really good. You know,
Yeah,
that was
feel
probably
good.
the only time I ever did that. But it was just,
Yeah,
it's that type of relationship you have with folks of knowing
yeah,
that you have value to provide to them. It's not just a
yeah.
people management experience.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, that definitely. I feel like a lot of that happened on like the team that we were on at Clerk. I feel like we I feel like we understood each other more as human beings rather than like for what they did at the company. It
Mm.
was more on a human level. And I feel like once you kind of get a really good understanding of like the people on your team and the person, I feel like you can then that transpires into the actual work. And I think that then goes on to obviously um, the autonomy and trust that you have with your teammates and your co-workers. I feel like that just like up levels 1,000%.
Mm.
Um,
Yeah.
so yeah, definitely I agree with that.
Yeah, cool. So we've talked now about our experience and kind of who we are and how we've worked together and the teams and such. Um, I think folks are wanting to know about the career progressions for themselves. I want to dig into that. I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing for me is progression in design is not just about making prettier work. It's about communicating better. Communication is the number one thing. It does not
Yeah.
matter how good of a designer you are. If you can't communicate, it's not going to work.
Yeah.
You have to be good at navigating uncertainty, unclear constraints, ambiguity, and knowing when to push on things, but also knowing when to rest. Um, Design being very subjective. There's certainly tons of opinions, and we have to be really great storytellers. And that storytelling comes through communication, which builds trust. There's reliability factors in there. Career growth isn't just about job titles. And you definitely have to be conscious, I think, of what sort of track you want to take. You made it clear, like, I just don't see myself being a head of design manager, things like that. So I'm taking more of an IC career track. In an IC career track, I think ends up more mentorship rather than
Hmm.
managing, of course, to where
Yeah.
there's this management and leadership track that there's extra skill sets that you have to kind of refine in there. I'm still
Hmm.
holding on to mostly of the IC stuff for me, but I have felt what I can contribute as a manager in a leadership role, and
Yeah.
there's certainly good parts about that as well that I've enjoyed more than what I thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But like I said, I don't think career growth necessarily is about titles. It's about earning trust and making that impact and ownership.
Of course.
What's been your, I guess, most difficult hurdle in your career progression?
I think a lot of that resonates with me, like even up until like maybe a couple of years ago, and I remember writing this in one of my like 6 month reviews when I was at Clerk. Was like, just for context, obviously, I was a freelancer for the longest time, so I feel like it's totally different. Well, not totally different, but like because you're not like part of like a team and you don't fully understand the people that you're working with, and you don't fully know the people you're working with on a contractual basis. If you're just doing like a couple of weeks worth of work for someone, you don't fully know that person compared to if you were actually hired as like a full-time designer at a company. So I feel like even up till like a couple of years ago, like I feel like I struggled with the communication part because I was so like deep rooted in the work, where I would be like, right, here's like the pages, or the page that I'm going to be working on, and I'd be so like focused on the work rather than like taking like, even just like to go macro, like even like if I was working on like a hero section or whatever, like communicating those ideas clearly at that kind of beginning stage to then kind of future benefit the team, so that maybe a developer can then start planning like how they're going to build this section, like
Mm.
maybe clearly kind of communicating some of like the ideas around any animation work or whatever. And I feel like I've got better at that for sure, like being on the team at Clerk. And but I feel like, yeah, that was definitely something that I just like was sort of like ignorant to, for sure. Like I just assumed, sometimes I would just assume that people would know what I'm talking about, even though like, even though they didn't. But so yeah, I think like for sure, I think communication is definitely the biggest thing for me. And like you said, I think if you can really nail that down, and you can do it in your own way, and you can do it in a way that benefits the people that you're working with and your team that you're working with, I think that goes a long way for sure.
Yeah. The being a part of the team, being reliable, being friendly, being easy to work with, the
Yeah,
communication, like you mentioned, and the quality is, I think, all part of growing. And I saw you grow in all those areas, absolutely. But you were also hungry for that and asking the right questions of like how do I get better at this, and what do I
yeah,
need to do next? And you were curious about especially the deliverable aspect in the process of working with a
yeah.
larger team and keeping
Hmm.
stakeholders involved in kind of what you were doing, but still able to kind of form the story and the visuals that you wanted to create, but then learning how to kind of communicate with engineering sooner of this is kind of
Yeah,
what's going to be happening, like you said, so that they can prepare more for what's to come. I think of that whole like career progression is like three C's: the craft, the character, and communication. So your craft in your career is going to continue to grow and get refined. Your character, how you work with teams, your reliability, kind of who you are seen as, is going to continue to evolve. And then obviously your communication. Like communication is the career multiplier. Strong
yeah.
communication unlocks more opportunity and influence than talent alone. Um,
Hmm.
because if you can communicate your ideas, you can start getting other folks who have that craft and that output honed, that want to be involved with what you're doing because of how you're communicating it, the excitement, the story, the vision. But also, as you are learning to communicate better and more effectively, leadership sees that as well, and there's less worry, there's less
Yeah,
there's less
yeah,
interest in what you're doing because you
yeah,
are effectively communicating kind of what you're doing. The most problems you can create for yourself on a team is silence, and kind of going off and doing nothing. It's incredibly important, I think, to share maybe even progress along the way, or even just sort of updates, even if you're just kind of talking into the void. I can't tell you how many
hmm,
times I've seen it on leadership teams of leadership conversations around this person is just so excellent at just talking about what they're doing. There are no responses to those Slack messages. There are no responses in threads. There's no interaction with that message, but it's seen and it's visible, and it gives
hmm.
that sense of comfort of that person has
Yeah,
everything under control. So I think it's
yeah,
extremely critical to signal how well something is going, even if you don't need anything at all. And as far as showing in progress stuff, I think as designers, and I totally understand this as well, I don't want to put out anything that's kind of in progress for folks to give feedback on because it's just in progress. I haven't really felt like I've nailed this yet, but it's
yeah,
completely acceptable to say that, to post something and say, this is in progress. I'm not looking for feedback yet, just showing where I'm at with it. And
yeah,
then I think folks really have to respect that you're not wanting feedback. But it also could drum up excitement and inspiration for others to like, hey, I have an
for
idea.
sure.
Can I team up with you on this? Can I pair with you on this? So that
Yeah,
sort of like exposure not only provides help to your teams and builds that character, it also, is very visible as a communication method to your managers and to the rest of leadership. And I don't think that people quite understand that, how much is seen from a leadership perspective on that. I think you're guilty of this as well, because you don't want anybody to see anything that's not super polished.
yeah, yeah. I think yeah. On that point, I feel like that's where I struggle probably the most. Like because whatever it is you're designing at the company, you obviously want as much input and as much from your team. You want to make sure that it's a team effort, but at the same time, if you've been maybe sharing that project or part of the project that you've been working on, you want to make sure that when it goes live, um, it's got your name to it at the end of the day. You want that to be as pristine as possible, and you're obviously super happy with it. So, um, yeah,
Yeah, I think that matters most on the deliverable, like what the world
yeah,
sees internally on your team. There's that trust, and you're just
yeah, of
inspiring with
course,
communication, inspiring with process. And I think it's really critical to kind of have that kind of vulnerable intention
of
of,
course,
here's
yeah,
where I'm at with things. I'm not done
yeah,
yet.
Yeah.
But things are in progress because
Yeah.
there might be other teams. For you especially doing marketing websites primarily, there's a marketing team that's going to wonder where you're at with things, and the silence creates uncertainty. And you'll start feeling pressure because nobody knows where this is at, and they have their initiatives
Yeah.
that align with the timing of what you're doing. And seeing that things are in progress and kind of moving along is absolutely critical, not only for your
Yeah.
team, not only for your manager, but for other teams
Yeah.
as well. So yeah, communicating where you are at, even if it's not ready for feedback, communicating your intentions, um, maybe communicating your decisions, why you're making decisions that you're making. It just helps others to align with your thinking and kind of
Yeah.
where you ultimately are going to be.
Yeah, you're almost creating like a visual timeline of communication, aren't
Yeah.
you? Like you're if you imagine it like this string, you're almost creating like this sort of kind of visual template of like here's you're kind of communicating at the beginning, and you're being vulnerable, like you mentioned, of here's something that isn't quite ready and isn't at where we want it to be, but it might inspire someone to give input and add to like what you've already done. And then, by just doing that incrementally over time, I feel like definitely 100% the communication part that all kind of works out if you kind of apply that sort of method on a team.
I think one of the hardest pieces of communication, and it will never really get easier, is communicating when something's off the rails, when there's a problem, when you're concerned, when there's an issue. But it's probably the most important piece of communication. A good manager, a good team, an empathetic team will totally understand when you're like, "Hey, this isn't going to be done when I thought it was going to be done because of X,
Yeah.
Y, and Z."
Hmm.
Um, Raising issues and concerns as early as possible is only going to build trust and reliability that
Hmm.
this person is going to signal some sort of concern that could impact the outcome, either timing or quality, most likely timing. Um, but it's incredibly important and honorable to say, this isn't going as like I had planned. I said I could
Yeah.
have this done at this time, but it's not going to be, and that's a sign of growth when someone is willing to step up and
Yeah.
early and often say like there's an issue. If you
Yeah.
don't signal it when it's a small issue, it will absolutely balloon to become a much larger issue.
Yeah.
um, and those larger issues are now problems. Those
Hmm.
small issues can be solved quickly. A game plan can be put in place. But when you are changing planning because something was a small issue, now a big issue, it's now a problem, and it has to involve other people for solutions.
Hmm.
So I think it's a critical thing for people to try if they're scared of that, is when you're feeling anxious about something not getting done, or maybe feeling even uninspired, to signal that
Hmm.
early, because managers should be positioning you with projects that are inspiring to you and exciting to you. That's where you're going to do your best work. So even things like that, I think folks should signal to say that there's an issue with this. And I think along with that, try to provide a solution. Try to figure out what would a good solution be for this. As you grow in your career, the more senior you are, the more expected you are to provide and execute the solutions to problems. So try to figure out sort of what will the solution be to this issue, even if it's some sort of small contribution. Expecting others to solve issues and solve problems for you it becomes burdensome, and most of
Yeah.
us, if not all of us, are capable of overcoming these ourselves. But just at least communicating and signaling, here's the issue and here's what I'm going to do about it. Is that okay?
Yeah. No, I agree. I think 100% agree with it. Everything you've said there. I feel like I've definitely had that experience before of being, in a project or whatever, and you've kind of overreached on the sort of deadline that you've kind of promised, but you kind of have to have that awkward conversation of, listen, the kind of work there is probably going to take a little bit longer than anticipated. Um, but yeah, I think like if you communicate that early enough, and you're kind of honest with yourself, and you're honest with whoever it is that you're working with, that's all you can do, and I think, like you said, coming up with a solution to that, and being vulnerable again, and just being, like I said, being honest with yourself, and how you approach the solution is the best thing you can do.
Mhm. Yeah. I want to go through kind of roles and kind of my perspective on roles for folks that
Hmm.
are later on in their career who have already gotten through junior roles, mid-level roles, things like that. Will have experience in this, but I think they also need to be reminded of the understanding of what other people are going through and kind of what their expectations are. I've seen too many times what I feel is a lot of pressure on, especially more junior folks from more senior folks, being, and I'm certainly guilty of this as well, of being that they could do something better or faster, and expecting other folks to execute at their level, or discounting them because they didn't execute at their level. And I think that that's a concerning trait to a culture and needs to be addressed when noticed. So yeah, going through the roles, I took some notes here, kind of on from a designer perspective. Of course, there's a junior designer, and someone starting off on their career. They're soldiers. They're executing highly scoped tasks. Here's what you need to
Hmm.
do, and here's how you should do it. There's not a lot of freedom in execution there. There's more freedom in the process of how they get there and kind of developing their own skill sets and efficiencies,
Hmm.
and learning more about what excites them. They might not be responsible for doing the flashiest, most polished projects in the company at that time, but certainly can contribute to those in some sort of ways. A good example, I remember Luke at Clerk. He would team up with you on assets, and it was extremely valuable for both of you. It was valuable for you to be able to
Yeah.
communicate to him kind of your intentions and mentor him to help him grow, but invaluable for him, or valuable for him to learn from you and see how you're working and be inspired by that. And it was really incredible to kind of watch that relationship grow your skill sets, but also his skill sets in that way. But again, it was the responsibilities were very much, this is what you're going to be doing, and here's how to do it, and he gets to choose kind of how to get there through those constraints. So
Hmm.
they're all about learning the process and building craft, at that phase. And then a mid-level, designer starts to own features and flows, starting to manage timelines and trade-off, getting into that world of afforded more freedom and kind of, here is a goal, here's what we see the end result being like, and having more control of kind of how they get there and what it takes to get there, and more ownership over kind of the end result of what it's going to be. And then you have your senior folks. So now you're getting into, instead of owning features, you're owning problems. You're kind of determining what the solution to those problems are, and determining the outcomes. Thinking more thinking more holistically, and leading conversation, kind of inspiring folks, asking harder questions and more deeper questions, uncovering more constraints, making sure that the mid-level and junior designers kind of have a clear path on what the solution is going to be, and more clearly defined constraints, because like a mid-level or a junior folk might not understand kind of what area they're working within as well.
Hmm.
And I think seniors are really great for feedback as well, and kind of like seeing the things that the other folks are not seeing. Maybe the solution that they're presenting isn't optimal for a web layout or for a mobile layout or for patterns, things like that with them. And then you have your staff lead folks who own systems and have a much larger team impact. Um, Coincidentally enough, the further along you get in your career, the kind of less designing that you do. And I've always noticed that, and that's
Yeah.
what's been kind of against this manager growth stage for me, because yeah, the higher you get, the less design you do, because the more planning you're doing,
Of
more
course.
mentorship, more communication you're doing. But it's
Yeah.
extremely valuable for those folks looking up to you and wanting to learn. You
Yeah.
certainly have to kind of inject yourself and find yourself setting time aside for
Hmm.
still doing what you love. Again, I still love pushing pixels. I love
Yeah.
writing code. That's what I want to do. But it benefits other people, and I find a lot of gratification in teaching and mentoring and helping folks get in wherever they want to be. But yeah, so the staff lead role, you can own systems and team impact, mentors other, connects the dots across efforts is what I put here. So communicating across teams, setting expectations to other teams, and such. And then you have your manager, director roles, and your people strategy, roadmap, your
Yeah.
coaching, setting direction, enforcing culture. And I think most importantly for me is shielding teams, whatever that might be, to where
Yeah.
the team has no idea any sort of problems that might be coming up, process improvements that kind of all get solved through easier conversations with them and harder conversations elsewhere. That's the hardest part for me.
Yeah.
It's very mentally taxing and
Of
stressful
course.
to
Yeah.
kind of manage those expectations and be able to protect the team to have the
Yeah.
freedom, and kind of runway to perform at their best. There's certainly trade-offs. There's absolutely coordination, and there's certainly compromises. Um, yeah, that's kind of where I see the track, kind of where you are at, like a staff level, and that's where you've been for a little while. How are you, feeling that reflects to your path of where you've came from?
Yeah, just yeah, like when you were talking about there, like how when you kind of start off as like a sort of kind of junior designer and you work through maybe through to like where I would maybe be in fit into the team or a team at the moment. I feel like you definitely have that decision to make where, like we touched on previously, if you kind of want to go into a more kind of staff level role or, a kind of head of design. Um, are like I feel like for me, I feel like I said before, I just love to actually push the pixels and be in Figma and helping out whether other designers on the team if they have any questions or kind of I feel like for me personally, like that's where I don't think I would continue to like even go into like that sort of role just purely because I'm passionate about actually designing and losing that control and losing that grip on that one certain job, whether having to jump in and deal with other teams and stuff like that. I think that's just where me naturally I don't know, I just couldn't get into that sort of position, so yeah, I think like for me, I've had that discussion like with myself a few times. Like what am I going to do in a few years if should I join in? Should I try and like up level and jump into like a more senior kind of staff level role or a kind of managing role? But honestly, I just feel like I love where I'm at and I love doing what I do, and jumping into Figma and having that free time and um,
And I think
having
that
like
does
it's
reflect your skill sets the best. I think of that, working with you, certainly you like the influence and you like to really contribute to the direction of the visual design and influence that, help
yeah,
others get there. And I've always
yeah,
appreciated that. And I think that's a super valuable person on the team. I would be
yeah,
concerned if you wanted to get away from that
yeah.
more and wanted to manage more people.
Yeah, I think I think that probably, just to touch on it, I think like um I think it probably sort of is why we formulated this podcast. Probably it's a good touching point because I feel like having being like sort of kind of lead designer on a team, you do have to it sort of kind of brings out that educational element in yourself where you kind of subconsciously teaching other kind of maybe junior designers that are kind of looking at your Figma file and maybe asking you questions and things like that. And I feel like that's been a surprise for me because yeah, obviously, I actually love doing that part of it. I actually really enjoy, the sort of kind of educational aspect of it, and showing people different techniques and things like that I've just learned over the years. And I think it's coming to fruition with obviously this podcast and what we've got planned with it. And yeah, I'm excited obviously to jump into that sort of kind of that sort of educational aspect and content.
Yeah, that's very much aligns with like the mentorship part of things, and
Yeah.
that like kind of later IC track, and that's why I'm really glad that you're kind of in that with ICs. Like IC, individual contributor. I've had folks ask me what IC means. IC growth comes from expanding ownership and influence to where leadership shifts more towards empowering employees and managing culture and ambiguity. So like I said, I'm glad you're focused more on the kind of educational aspect, because I think that people get most of their value from you there. Um, Title wise in all this, like I don't know. I don't know about you. I've never really cared about titles. I just want
No.
to do good work.
Yeah.
I think that that's why I've always liked to work on small teams, because I just want to influence anywhere that I can. I've always been the person that will jump around to hopping on customer calls, sales decks need improved. Of
Yeah.
course, marketing sites need updated. Maybe there's a board meeting deck that needs to look nicer. Like I just jump everywhere that I can provide value. And
Yep.
so having this like title to,
Yeah.
I
It
don't know,
doesn't really mean
it's never
anything.
really, yeah, it's never
Yeah.
really mattered
Yeah. I
to me.
think you
I've
need to
never,
just be malleable in your role,
yeah,
and if I definitely feel like that's something that I try to do, and I feel like is obviously throughout the years, working on different teams and different projects and stuff like that. That's definitely one aspect of it where like I was always kind of confused, because I was like, what's the like a mid-level designer shouldn't just be doing like mid-level designer stuff. If you're really proficient and you're really talented at something that might be described as like something that a senior designer would do, then you should just do that. You shouldn't just stick and be sort of kind of constrained in that sense. I feel like I said, I think you should try. A good trait is just to be like malleable, and try and just, if someone needs help with something very macro on a certain design, you should just jump in and do it. If you've got the time and you're able to do it. So, no, I agree.
yeah.
I think that's a good trait to have.
Nobody hates their stuff being better. And
Yeah.
I enjoy seeing folks working on things that maybe I can contribute to and just provide ideas or examples. And most often it's like, oh, like this is and it brings more pride to their output, because
Yeah.
the thing that they're delivering is now part of something greater than what it was going to be.
Yeah.
And it's not just a design asset or an interface or a marketing website. Again, it's all the way to a changelog post that an engineer's putting together. Like, here's a visual for that. If you want to have a visual, to show what you've done, they're even more about proud of what they did, and communicating that either internally or externally. Again, I mentioned like sales decks, like those teams, they're not going to go to someone to sell something and be like, here's a deck that our designer created.
Yeah.
Like that, they're proud of the asset that they're bringing to. And it also just makes them look so much more polished and professional, having something so high quality.
Yeah.
So again, just like figuring out those opportunities to make other people's stuff better is where I get, I think, the most enjoyment.
For sure.
And it builds those, the trust across teams. It kind of builds that character and helps with that communication that we were talking about earlier. There was a pricing feature that we were working on at Clerk, and I don't think there's any really design available for that. So I jumped in on the feature, and I hadn't worked with some of those engineers yet. And the feedback from the director of engineering that was on that was they were surprised at how down to earth I was, and they were surprised at how like chill and fun I was to work with. I'm like, it's so
Yeah.
so wild. That's like, it's like the anti-title thing. Like, I don't want to have
Mhm.
a title because I don't want to come in and work on this as head of
Yeah.
design and have this like intimidation factor, I guess, something like that. Cause I just don't want that. Like, I just want to come
Yeah,
in, we shipped something
of
that they were
course.
extremely proud of. And,
Yeah,
that's all that mattered to me was like, let's make this thing incredible. Like, you're going to
of
write the code,
course.
I'll do the design, and I'll
Yeah,
build the front end for you. And that it like bummed me out that was kind of the impression that they left with. Not bummed me out that was a result, but that was there was a hesitation going into
like the
that meeting and that
anticipation.
relationship. Yeah,
Yeah,
anticipation of like this, like,
yeah,
stubborn
yeah,
leader or something like that. So
yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah, I
that's
mean,
the title thing gets me with that.
yeah, I think that should always be the end goal anyway, is to whatever project that is you're jumping into is just like, let's just make this the best that it can possibly be, regardless of how we get there. It's yeah, that's interesting. That's
I
an
think Patrick
interesting.
Collison at Stripe was the one that said, whatever we put out on the internet should be the best version of that thing on the internet.
Yeah,
And it's always stuck with me. Colin at Clerk had always said that, and I really appreciated that. And like, anything that we ship should be the best version of that thing on
yeah,
the internet, and that's
yeah,
always the goal. So
yeah.
yeah, I don't think people should chase titles. I think that they should focus on the impact that those titles are meant to reflect, and
Yes.
align their track to what that goal is for them along with that.
Yeah. No, 100%. I agree. Yeah, definitely.
Let's talk about some strategies for proficiency, efficiency. And these are maybe obvious, maybe less obvious, kind of some strategies that I use. And I certainly want you to contribute to this as well. Any thoughts? But something that I've done over the past couple of years that has been a big efficiency and velocity uplift for me is trying to batch meetings. Um,
Hmm.
Dan on Twitter posted recently about, and we'll
I've
link
seen
to
that.
this one,
Yeah.
about how expensive meetings are for designers, because even like a 30-minute meeting requires you to prepare for that meeting early on and then try to get back into
Yep.
flow afterwards. And it's so true. Oh man, like,
Yeah.
if
I
I
agree.
see, and I see this on my meetings days, I'll have a half hour or 45-minute gap between a meeting. There's nothing of substance that I'm going to pick up and get started, because there's
Yeah.
no chance that I'm going to get into any sort of grind flow to
Yeah.
execute well on that. So it's just really kind of demotivating. So if your meetings are scattered throughout the week like that, there are just sections of the days where you're efficient, and the
Yep.
rest of the day is pretty much completely lost. And
Hmm.
that's something that I've been doing lately, is trying to pick a day or 2 days and piling meetings into those days, and just know
Yeah.
that those meetings are lost for actual output. And it's just a whole
Yeah.
lot of planning and talking, eliminating
Yep.
as many meetings as possible. But as you grow in your
Hmm.
career, it's inevitably going to be involved in more and more conversations that you can communicate. And frankly, as a manager, I prefer to have the meetings that other people don't have to have, so that I can drop you a Slack message on, this is what's upcoming, start thinking about it. And then you can go check out that Slack message at your convenience, rather than having a half-hour meeting to talk about that one thing that could have been a sentence.
Hmm.
So there's certainly that. But yeah, meetings are a pain, and they are
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
massive distraction and
Yeah,
impact
for
to
sure.
output.
Yeah, I agree. I think like coming from like obviously I'm not on a team, right now, but I think like it very much aligns the same as just when you're freelancing, or if you're running your own agency or whatever. I feel like I do the same thing. I try and like batch like all my calls for that day, like on a specific day, or spread out across like maybe 2 days, and then there's like a good portion of the week where I'm just fully focused on the design work that I'm working on for that week. I feel like Granola. I don't know if you use Granola,
Mhm,
the
I
the,
do.
the note taking.
Mhm.
I feel like that's like saved my life, because like for me, like you said, it's just like mentally taxing, and it's also taxing on your creativity if you've got like a call with a client and they're kind of saying, right, okay, here's what we want you to work on, but like kind of takes you like half an hour to like kind of deflate from that call, in that meeting where you're kind of being thrown all this stuff at you, so
Mhm.
yeah, for me, and from my perspective, definitely, I think having those dedicated days to just, where you're planning and you're kind of you're mapping out that maybe the next week or the next few days is definitely important for keeping kind of your work streamlined for that week or next few days.
Yeah, and another one, finding when you find momentum, like ride that wave. Turn
Yeah.
off your Slack
Do
notifications.
not disturb mode.
Do not disturb. Yeah, just like ride that wave. Um, if something's coming up, like a meeting or something like that is about to happen, try to move it. Try to get your manager to go to that meeting for you if possible, like something like that, because like that's so precious, that flow
Yeah.
state is so precious. So trying to protect that and stay in that groove, I think, is incredibly important. Um, Alternate to that, I understand that some people might be in flow, and I think especially with Slack can be so distracting. There's a strategy to communicating in Slack as well. A lot of people have a lot going on, and something like an emoji as a reaction to something can be more valuable than you think, because if someone says something that they don't need an acknowledged response to, try to use an emoji instead, because they don't get a notification for that.
Hmm.
So, um, hey, I did that thing that you told me to do, can just be a response, like thumbs up. They don't need
Yeah.
it. Thanks. Like use a thank you emoji instead. Like thanks,
Yeah.
something like that isn't usually something that needs to be a notification on top of your screen. So trying to kind of protect their time as well. I
Yeah.
wish that I could send a message in Slack as a silent message that someone could
Hmm.
find. Um, Maybe it doesn't show up on their icon as they're tabbing through apps. Maybe it shows up in some sort of way. But I would love to be able to send people messages that I know that they're not going to get, because it's not important for them to get notified. So I'm just going to
Yeah.
send it and they don't get pinged about it. But alternatively to that, make sure you're not using emojis for things that people need to know that you saw and need to know that you understand. I've also had that situation of like, I told James this thing, like, I haven't seen it yet. And then I see that, like, I wonder if he knows about it. And then I go in and maybe it was an emoji response. I was like, oh, well, that's why I didn't know that he got it or not, because there wasn't any sort of confirmation around that. So there's a strategy on protecting other people's times, their flow state as well as yours. Um, I think people don't appreciate that as much. And as you have more meetings, more responsibility for others, you start really kind of seeing that and understanding that more, as opposed to people who don't have as many notifications and don't get interrupted quite as much, might not empathize around that quite as much. So I encourage folks that next time you're going to respond to somebody on Slack, try to decide, should this be a message or just a simple emoji? Like,
Yeah.
a do they need a notification for what you're about to respond with? And they will appreciate that, especially your managers, who
Yeah.
are getting bombarded with notifications.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Like I feel like I don't do that enough. I feel like being mindful of, like, that person might be, like you say, in like their flow state of being completely creative, and yes, they might have on like do not disturb and they might have all their like notifications turned off, but I think like just being mindful of that is like another like really cool trick to have up your sleeve, and you're being you're kind of you're taking that into consideration.
Yeah. Another thing too, about being in flow state, also, like if you're near the end of your day, I think getting out or stopping or pausing something that you're grinding on and excited about is also healthy, because coming back in the morning is so much more exciting. I think it was
Yeah.
Josh Kamo that posted about this. I think there might be a blog post. I'll find it and put it in show notes if I can. But talking about like, stop your day while you're excited at something, rather than
Yeah.
trying to finish it that day. Because yeah, you wake up in the
Yeah.
morning and you are so stoked, to come
Yeah, I
back.
relate to this so much. Like
Yeah.
I relate to this so, like, so often that happens to me where, like maybe during the day, like I just wasn't feeling as creative, or I maybe had like a few things on, and I was kind of coming back and forward to my computer, and then all of a sudden at night you're kind of you kind of just about to wrap up, and you're you're completely like, you're completely inspired, and you kind of want to just jump right into working on it. But I've done that so many times where I've just said, right, okay, it's best just to leave that certain project till tomorrow, because like I'll be excited to just jump in right
Mhm.
away, and you've kind of almost got like a kind of, you're a step ahead of like what you want to work on for that next day, and
Yeah.
yeah, I agree. I think it's such a good point.
I just open up like text tool in Figma and start like typing notes of things that I,
Yeah.
want to do, or my ideas, so that they're not lost. But it also, I
Hmm.
think it contributes to avoiding burnout, and, overworking yourself just because you're excited, can eventually contribute to too much overwork and lead to
Hmm.
burnout. So that constant sort of excitement, and dopamine hit when you start your day is just like the best way to start.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely.
Another thing is, the alternative to that is when you're out of office, when you're taking time off, like take time off. Uh, Promotions and growth is not lost from not responding while on vacation. Like, no one's going to ding you because you said you were on vacation and not responding to messages. Like, what a toxic
Hmm.
culture that would be. I think it's alternatively highly respected of somebody protecting their time,
Hmm.
and showing that there is more to their life than just, this job. Um, I think that if you're needed while you're out, it hopefully shows the value of you being there. If people are hoping, excited for you to come back, that it just shows, like I said, yeah, the value of what you're contributing to the team and to the projects.
Yeah.
Um, the alternate of that is, if you're poking in and trying to stay involved while you're out, it kind of exposes a bit of potential uncertainty, of your effectiveness. You're not trusting that it's going to go okay while you're gone.
Yeah.
So I think stepping away is sort of, I mean, you take a lot of really great trips, and I think that you've always been really good at just kind of disconnecting to refresh and
Yeah.
come back.
Yeah, it's super important for sure. And I think, like, like you said, you've been able to protect your time like that and having those boundaries, especially when you're on a team, or I think this also leads back to like the communication part as well at the start of the conversation or the podcast. I feel like communicating what you need to get done before your trip, and doing what you have to do so that your teammates can then um, get on with whatever it is, the project, and they
Mm-hmm.
can do that whilst you're away is such a powerful thing, I feel. And not having to rely on if they need to maybe send you a message or whatever. But yeah, 100%. I think like being upfront and honest, and yeah, protecting your time, super valuable to your team for sure.
Mhm. You also need to be responsible for your time off. You need to make sure that your team is set up for success with you leaving. If
Yeah.
you bounce with unanswered questions,
Yeah.
unclosed work that people are waiting on you, I think that you really have to, if you know people are going to be relying on you while you're gone, then you did a poor job of preparing for your time off. Like, you
Hmm.
owe it to your team or to that project to make sure that folks have what they need from you before you step away. They will certainly appreciate that a whole lot more, especially engineers, knowing that way you can step away for your day, weeks of time, knowing that they have a sufficient amount of work, to take care of. Yeah, sustainable progress comes from pacing, not pushing
For sure.
constantly.
Yeah.
So take time off, and seriously take the time off. I'm
Yeah.
very lucky to have Katie Dill, head of design at Stripe, as a mentor, and I'll never forget one of the things she said about taking time off. And she has a over 200-person design team. She said, what type of example does that set to your team as a leader, if when you are taking time off but not actually taking time off? And
Yeah.
so for the managers and the leaders, and staff, principals, the higher up design folks, it sets a strong signal to your team that, like, when I take time off, I take time off, and it's okay for you to do that as well. And
Yeah.
especially as a leader, because I struggle with it just because I love work, and I love to be
Hmm.
involved, and I miss my team when I'm out. But that was a pretty strong signal that she sent of, what type of example does that set for your team? If you are coming in while you're out, they're going to feel like they're expected to still stay involved while they're out, and I don't want
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. You're like the figurehead at the company, so you have to like set those examples. And I feel like that's such a good that's such a good one where If you're not doing that, and you're saying you're doing one thing but you're doing another, then it's like you said, it kind of sets a precedent for the rest of the team.
Yeah, it really does. So this week, I encourage folks to take one small action on what we've talked about here, and pick some sort of communication habit or productivity habit to improve. Just something small and consistent will lead to a ton of growth. Encourage folks to reach out to us via the Shape FM Twitter account as well. Any questions, any help, kind of direction, anything that you're not sure about, like we'd love to figure out how to contribute to your story and your journey and your growth as well. We've been through a lot of this. We're still learning, of course, and I'm sure you're stoked to help other people with that type of stuff too.
Absolutely, yeah, I would totally encourage that. Yeah, we're still early on in this podcast, and we're just trying to find ways to obviously help, encourage, and obviously educate, and I think that's a big part of what we're trying to do it for this podcast. On that note, obviously, we've got future episodes kind of planning out, and we're kind of doing that at the moment. So, yeah, you can expect a lot more of like an interactive episode where, me and Derek will be kind of, in Figma and bouncing ideas off each other. How that looks right now, we're still figuring out. But keep an eye out on the Shape Twitter account, and yeah, we'll keep you posted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Next week, we're going to do some designing together, kind of in Figma. It'll be a bit more of a visual episode. We can riff on some ideas, kind of explore the details that we've been talking about, share some kind of advanced methods on adding sort of the extra polish that we expect from ourselves and expect from our teams to designs that I think it hopefully be pretty inspirational. It'd be a really great learning experience, and I'm happy to share those Figma files as well once we're done with them, so that people can dig into them a little bit further.
Yeah, that could be interesting. Yeah.
I'd like to start asking folks to DM, again, the Shape FM Twitter account with your designs, either through Figma files or screenshots, whatever works best for you, for us to start looking through. And James and I will pick some of our favorites that we feel have the most opportunity, and we can run through some iterations together on them, provide some ideas, and then give those back to you. If you want to stay anonymous, let us know. Like, we won't share who the design came from. If you want folks to know who it came from, we're happy to share as well. But I think that'd be a really exciting kind of contribution as well, to take your designs to us and be able to contribute in any sort of way to either inspire or help with your quality output as well.
Yeah, I'm really excited about those episodes. I feel like, if we start, like Derek said, if we start collecting, potential ideas to work on, and we can obviously jump into Figma and try and help improve those designs, whether it's through, just jumping right into it and kind of riffing on some ideas. I can't wait for that. I can't wait to explore that part of it. So yeah, I'm excited about that. You can send those, like Derek said, on the Shape FM Twitter account, and we can go from there.
Cool. Stoked about it. Thanks everybody for hanging out with us. This was quite a meaty informational episode here. I'm excited to do more of these as well. But I'll see you next week, James.
See ya.